The scent of dry leaves and ozone hung heavy over the parking lot of the Fresh Market in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. But inside, the air was crisp, sterile, and thick with a very specific kind of panic. I stood at the register, watching the digital red numbers tally up like a timer counting down to an explosion, $874.12. On the moving conveyor belt lay a grotesque monument to grandiosity. Slabs of Japanese A5 Wagyu, artisanal imported cheeses, 3 bottles of 2018 Napa Valley Cabernet, and organic produce that looked like it had been hand-picked by angels. None of it was for me. In fact, I hadn't even been invited to the dinner party at their country club estate in Durham that evening. For 3 years, Evelyn Vance, a 68-year-old widow, had been the silent, invisible ATM for my son Julian and his wife, Victoria. But as Victoria's mother, Elinor, stood beside her, the air in the checkout line shifted. I didn't just feel taken advantage of anymore. I felt a cold, creeping sensation in the pit of my stomach, a sudden, terrible realization that this wasn't just greed. It was a calculated, systematic drain. Right on cue, as the teenager behind the register tapped his screen, Victoria and Elinor performed their little rehearsed ballet. Victoria patted her quilted Chanel handbag with a look of theatrical horror. "Oh no, Evelyn, you're not going to believe this. I left my wallet in my tote bag at home," she gasped, her eyes wide, glistening with an unsettling, unnatural innocence. Elinor chimed in instantly, resting a gloved hand on my forearm, a grip that felt less like affection and more like a clamp. "And mine is sitting right on the passenger seat of my car, dear." "Oh, Evelyn, you don't mind covering this just for tonight, do you? We can settle up later, of course. They didn't just expect me to pay, they needed me to pay." But as I looked at Victoria's manicured fingers, resting lightly on the chrome handlebar of the grocery cart, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Peeking out from the side pocket of her unzipped designer handbag was the distinct, gold-trimmed edge of her leather card holder. She hadn't forgotten a thing. They were testing me. They had been testing me for years. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I let out a soft, slow exhale and offered a smile that was completely devoid of warmth. "Wait," I said smoothly, stepping back from the terminal. "I need to do one thing first." I leaned toward the young cashier, who was looking between the three of us with widening eyes. "I will not be paying for any of this," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient hum of the store like a scalpel. "These ladies forgot their payment methods, and I am not buying groceries for a party I'm not attending. Please call a manager and have all of this restocked." Victoria's jaw dropped so fast I almost heard it snap. Elinor's face drained of color, her theatrical composure instantly collapsing into sharp, ugly rage. "Evelyn," Elinor hissed, her voice dropping an octave as she leaned closer, her breath smelling of faint peppermint and panic. "Are you out of your mind? People are staring. This is deeply humiliating." "Then I suggest you walk out to the parking lot and retrieve your wallet, Elinor," I replied quietly, taking 2 deliberate steps backward, completely out of their space. "Have a wonderful dinner party, ladies." I turned my back on their rising protests, pushed open the glass sliding doors, and stepped out into the cool autumn breeze of Chapel Hill. The air in my lungs felt different, sharper, cleaner. But as I unlocked my sedan, the illusion of a simple family disagreement vanished. My phone began to vibrate in my purse, buzzing with an aggressive, unrelenting rhythm. I didn't answer it. I let it vibrate against my hip, all the way down Interstate 40, as I drove toward my quiet home on the outskirts of Raleigh. My son, Julian, called 4 times in 20 minutes. By the time I pulled into my gravel driveway and cut the engine, the voicemail icon was flashing angrily on my dashboard. I picked up the phone on the 5th ring just as I stepped onto my front porch. "Mom, what on earth is wrong with you?" Julian roared through the speaker, bypassing any pretense of a greeting. His voice was laced with a frantic edge that went far beyond mere disappointment. "Victoria is in tears. Elinor is threatening to ban us from the club. You left them stranded at the register over groceries." "I didn't leave them stranded, Julian," I said, my voice chillingly level as I unlocked my front door. They loaded a cart with nearly $900 of luxury food and staged a scene. Your wife had her wallet in her bag. I saw it. A dead, heavy silence stretched over the line. For 3 seconds, Julian didn't breathe. It's just groceries, Mom, he stammered, his confidence momentarily shaken before he tried to pivot back to anger. You humiliated them. Over a misunderstanding. If paying for their own Wagyu beef is humiliating, they should change their menu, I answered, stepping into my dim foyer. I am not your emergency fund, Julian. And I am certainly not Victoria's event sponsor. Do not call me again tonight. I hung up before he could utter another word, but as the silence settled over my house, a strange, suffocating paranoia took root. I walked straight to my home office, pulled up my laptop, and logged into my online banking portal. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled up the detailed transaction logs for the past 12 months. I grabbed a red pen and a yellow legal pad, going line by line, charge by charge. What I found made my stomach turn into a tight, sickening knot. It wasn't just occasional help. It was a silent, bloodless robbery. $450 for emergency car detailing. $120 a month for high-end streaming bundles. A $1,200 holding deposit for a boutique hotel in Asheville that had never been repaid. Recurring charges at luxury spas in Charlotte. When I tallied the numbers at the bottom of the page, the red ink seemed to burn through the paper. $16,420. Over $16,000 of my late husband's life insurance and my own hard-earned retirement savings, systematically siphoned away while I had comfortably slept in the next room, believing I was simply being a supportive mother. The grocery store wasn't a sudden burst of entitlement. It was the climax of an invasion. They didn't just view my money as theirs, they viewed my entire life as an annex to their own. The next morning at dawn, I stood in my garage holding a steaming mug of black coffee, watching the gray light seep under the heavy aluminum door. My own car was parked outside on the asphalt because half of my garage space was completely unviable. Along the eastern wall sat a massive, commercial-grade wine preservation fridge that Victoria had shipped here 6 months ago, claiming their sleek, modern townhouse in downtown Raleigh didn't have the right vibrational acoustics for fine wine storage. Next to it stood 4 massive, locked plastic storage trunks filled with her off-season designer coats, alongside 2 sets of custom-made golf clubs belonging to Julian. They had taken a copy of my house key 3 years ago under the guise of checking on me, but they had turned my home into a private, climate-controlled, fee-free storage warehouse. I set my coffee mug down on the workbench. A cold, quiet resolve washed over me. I didn't text Julian. I didn't call Victoria. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed a local security and locksmith contractor in Wake County. By 1:00 p.m., a white commercial van pulled up the driveway. A sturdy, professional lock technician named Marcus stepped out, carrying a heavy steel toolbox. Just replacing the cylinders on the main entryways, ma'am, he asked. No, Marcus, I replied, looking him dead in the eye. I want commercial-grade high-security deadbolts installed on the front door, the back patio, and the side access to the garage. Completely new keys, heavy-duty strike plates. I want to ensure that no key previously made for this house will ever turn in these locks again. While Marcus went to work with his drills and chisels, the sound of grinding metal ringing through the hallway like music, I went into the garage. I didn't wait for permission. I dragged the 4 heavy plastic storage trunks out onto the concrete driveway, one by one, the plastic screeching against the floor. I hauled out the golf bags and set them upright against the bins. The wine fridge was far too heavy for me to move, so I reached behind its metallic frame and yanked the thick power cord from the wall outlet. The soft, ambient hum of the cooling compressors instantly died. I walked out to the garden shed, grabbed a massive, heavy-duty blue waterproof tarp, and draped it securely over their piled belongings in the driveway, anchoring the corners with 4 heavy cinder blocks. By 3:30 p.m., Marcus handed me 3 thick, silver keys with specialized security grooves. "These can't be duplicated at a hardware store, Mrs. Vance," he noted. "If someone tries to pick these or force a duplicate, the cylinder freezes permanently." I paid him in cash, locked the front door from the inside, and listened to the deep, heavy thunk of the deadbolt sliding into the steel frame. It was the most satisfying sound I had heard in a decade. The inevitable collision occurred at precisely 5:15 p.m. the following evening. I was sitting in my living room, sipping chamomile tea and reading a novel, when the quiet was shattered by the sound of heavy, rapid footsteps echoing across the wooden porch. Then came the metallic scrape of a key sliding into the brand-new lock. The key stopped halfway. A second later came the sound of frantic, aggressive jiggling, metal scraped against metal. The door handle rattled violently back and forth, vibrating against the frame. I carefully placed a ribbon bookmark in my page, set the book down, and walked slowly toward the entryway. Through the frosted side glass, I could see the distorted, furious outline of Victoria. I opened the heavy wooden door just 3 inches, keeping the security latch engaged. Victoria was standing there, holding an empty canvas tote bag, her designer sunglasses pushed up onto her head, her face flushed with blotchy, red anger. "Evelyn." "What is wrong with your door?" she snapped without greeting me. "My key is completely stuck. I need to get into the garage right now. We're having guests over and I need 6 bottles of the Duckhorn Merlot from the fridge." "The lock isn't broken, Victoria," I said, my voice cool and smooth. "It's brand new." She blinked, her eyes darting from my face down to the gleaming brass plates surrounding the keyhole. "New? Why on earth would you change the locks without giving us a copy?" "I need to get inside." I unlatched the door, stepped out onto the porch, and closed it firmly behind me, standing between her and the entrance. I raised my hand and pointed toward the edge of the driveway. "Your personal property is under that blue tarp. You are welcome to load the boxes and golf clubs into your vehicle right now. The wine fridge is still in the garage, but I unplugged it yesterday afternoon. You will need to have Julian bring a truck to remove it." Victoria stared at me, then spun around to look at the massive, tarpaulin-covered mountain sitting on the asphalt. Her eyes snapped back to mine, wild and incredulous. "Are you out of your mind? Are you doing this because of the grocery store? This is pathologically petty, Evelyn. You are throwing our things into the driveway over a few $100s. I am securing my residence," I corrected her gently, my tone utterly devoid of anger. "And you no longer have free, unmonitored storage space on this property. You have until Sunday at 5 o'clock to clear the driveway and remove the fridge. Otherwise, I have already arranged for a local charity to haul everything away as a tax-deductible donation. Do you have any idea how much those bottles of wine cost?" Victoria screamed, her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical pitch that echoed across the quiet neighborhood. "If that wine spoils because you unplugged the fridge, I will sue you. I swear to God, Evelyn, I will have Julian call a lawyer." "You are welcome to try," I said softly. "Please clear your bins from my driveway before it rains tonight." I stepped back inside, pulled the door shut, and turned the heavy silver deadbolt. The crisp, solid click echoed through the foyer like a final sentence. My phone rang within 10 minutes. It was Julian, his tone oscillating wildly between frantic threats and pathetic pleading. I didn't just stop at the locks, though. That night, sitting illuminated only by the glow of my laptop screen, I severed the invisible digital tethers they had used to bleed me dry. 3 years prior, Julian had convinced me to consolidate our mobile phone services into a shared family account with Verizon to save money. I logged into the portal and looked at the breakdown. For 34 consecutive months, I had been paying $285 every 30 days, a bill that covered not just my line, but Julian's, Victoria's, and surprisingly, an iPad data subscription registered to Victoria's mother, Eleanor. With 3 clicks, I initiated an immediate transfer of billing responsibility, generating individual transfer pins for their lines. A stark red warning popped up on the screen. If these lines are not accepted by a new account holder within 48 hours, service will be permanently disconnected. I copied the numbers, texted them directly to Julian without a single word of commentary, and then moved on to my digital subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Amazon Prime, Apple TV. I opened every single account, navigated to the security panels, and clicked the gloriously satisfying button, Sign out of all devices. Then, I changed every master password to a random string of 20 characters. The next morning, Thursday, brought a strange, deceptive calm. But as I sat drinking my morning tea, a sudden, cold realization washed over me. There was one loose thread I had completely overlooked, a thread that had been dangling for 7 long years. When Julian had been let go from his consulting firm back in 2017, I had set up a joint savings account with him at First Citizens Bank in downtown Raleigh. I had deposited $15,000 of my own money into it, telling him explicitly that it was an emergency safety net, reserved strictly for catastrophic medical events or mortgage default. Over the years, I had forgotten about its day-to-day existence, trusting my son's integrity. I grabbed my coat, drove straight down Fairview Road, and walked into the marble-columned lobby of First Citizens Bank. I sat down across from a senior account officer, handed over my state ID, and requested a complete, unredacted history of the joint account. The officer printed out 6 pages of statement histories and handed them across the dark mahogany desk. As my eyes scanned down the columns, my blood ran cold. The current balance was down to a meager $1,840. There had been no medical emergencies, no mortgage crises. Instead, the document revealed a slow, insidious, calculated drain over 30 months, $300 withdrawals at boutique clothing stores in Charlotte, $500 transfers to high-end auto detailing shops, $250 charges at 5-star resorts in Pinehurst. They hadn't robbed the account in one desperate heist, they had systematically parasite-fed on my safety net, assuming I would never look closely enough to notice. Mrs. Vance, the bank officer asked softly, noticing the color drain from my face. Is there something wrong? I am the primary owner and originator of this capital, correct? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. Yes, ma'am. You have full, unilateral authority over the account. Draw down the remaining balance immediately, I said, sliding the paper back across the desk. Issue it to me in a cashier's check made out solely to Evelyn Vance. Then, permanently close the joint account. Furthermore, I want to review any automatic clearinghouse payments linked to my primary checking account. 2 minutes later, another hidden parasite was exposed. An automated $115 monthly draft, pulling directly from my personal checking, to pay the premium on Julian's BMW insurance policy, a draft that had been running silently for over 4 years. I revoked the payment authorization on the spot, signed the cancellation affidavits, and walked out of the bank with my cashier's check tucked safely in my leather purse. The trap had been dismantled piece by piece. Now, all that was left was to wait for them to realize they were standing on thin ice. The counterstrike came on Saturday morning in the form of a call from a leaner. I let it ring 4 times before answering, putting the phone on speaker while I trimmed the foliage on my living room ferns. Hello, Aliner, I said, my tone as icy as a winter frost in the Appalachian Mountains. Evelyn, darling, Aliner's voice chirped, dripping with a sugary, artificial warmth that was almost nauseating. Oh, I am so glad I caught you. Listen, Victoria and Julian are hosting a small, intimate Sunday brunch tomorrow afternoon at their townhouse. Just immediate family. Victoria has been under so much stress lately, and we all know how tense things have been this week. We would just love for you to come over so we can put all this unpleasantness behind us. I stopped my brass shears mid-snip. A reconciliation brunch, how thoughtful. Yes. We are family, after all, Aliner purred smoothly. Oh, and Evelyn, since you'll be driving right past Seaforth Seafood Market on your way into town. Victoria was hoping you could do us one tiny little favor and pick up the pre-ordered cold lobster and caviar platter she put in for tomorrow. It's under her name, you can just grab it on your way. The audacity was so breathlessly grand, it was almost magnificent. "Did Victoria prepay for the platter online, Eleanor?" I asked, keeping my voice entirely neutral. A brief, telltale pause hung on the line. I could hear the faint sound of Eleanor taking a nervous puff of a cigarette. "Oh, well no, dear, you know how those high-end fish markets are. They don't take credit cards over the phone for custom orders. You can just cover it at the register when you pick it up, and we'll settle up with you as soon as you walk through the door." The exact same playbook as the grocery store. A staged, public trap wrapped in a fake olive branch, designed to force me to pay $300 for my own forgiveness. "Eleanor," I said, leaning closer to the phone, my voice dropping into a low, deadly register. "I will not be attending brunch tomorrow. I will not be driving down Fairview Road. And I will never, under any circumstances, pay for a seafood platter for people who view me as an unpaid domestic line of credit. Tell Victoria to cancel her order before they charge her account a restocking fee." I hung up before she could respond. Immediately setting my phone to Do Not Disturb. The final explosion happened on Sunday afternoon at 2:00 p.m. The sound of screeching tires echoed down my quiet residential street as Julian's black SUV slammed to a halt at the foot of my driveway. He threw the door open and marched up the brick walkway, his face crimson, his chest heaving with fury. Victoria trailed closely behind him, her arms crossed tightly, glaring at the house like it was an enemy fortress. I didn't wait for them to pound on the door. I stepped out onto the front porch, pulling the heavy wooden door shut behind me, feeling the new deadbolt firmly locked at my back. I stood at the top of the brick steps, looking down at them. "The bank account is gone, Mom," Julian screamed, stopping at the bottom step, his voice cracking with rage and desperation. "My card was declined at the gas station. My car insurance lapsed yesterday. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I reclaimed my own money, Julian," I replied, standing tall, my hands folded neatly in front of me. "Money that you and your wife have been quietly stealing from me for 3 years to fund a lifestyle you cannot afford." "It wasn't stealing. It was a joint account," Julian yelled, throwing his hands into the air. "We are your family. Families support each other. You cut off our phones, you locked us out of our own storage, you threw our clothes into the driveway under a cheap tarp, and now you're destroying my credit score. You are 34 years old." "Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his panic with absolute clarity. "You are a grown man living in an expensive townhouse, wearing tailor-made suits, drinking $100 bottles of wine, and forcing your widowed mother to pay for your car insurance and your wife's luxury spa treatments. You didn't want a mother, you wanted a benefactor, and the bank is permanently closed." Victoria stepped forward, her eyes narrow and filled with venom. "You are a bitter, selfish old woman, Evelyn. You're going to end up completely alone in this house." I looked at Victoria, then turned my gaze back to my son, whose desperate, angry eyes finally met mine. "I would rather be alone in a quiet house," I said softly, "than surrounded by people who only love me for what they can drain out of my bank account. Take your boxes, take your golf clubs, and do not come back to this property until you are prepared to apologize as self-sufficient adults." I turned around, unlocked the heavy silver deadbolt, stepped inside, and closed the door. The thick wooden frame sealed out their voices, sealing in a profound, magnificent quiet. 6 months have passed since that Sunday afternoon. The silence in my home is no longer heavy or lonely. It is crisp, clean, and entirely mine. Without the constant, hidden financial bleeding, my savings have begun to recover, and for the first time in years, I sleep through the night without a tight knot of anxiety in my chest. 3 weeks ago, Julian came back. He didn't bring Victoria, and he didn't bring excuses. He stood on my front porch, looking thinner, wearing a modest suit, his arrogant posture replaced by a quiet, heavy humility. They had been forced to sell their expensive townhouse and move into a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Cary. They were budgeting now. They were paying their own bills. We sat in my sunroom, drinking simple tea in a long, delicate silence. He didn't ask for money. I didn't offer any. Are we ever going back to how things were, Mom? He asked quietly, staring down at his teacup. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, whom I will always love, but whom I will never again enable. No, Julian, I said gently. Because how things were was a lie, but we can build something new. My front door will always be open for a cup of coffee and an honest conversation. But the bank is closed for good. He swallowed hard, nodded slowly, and for the first time in his adult life, he looked at me not as a resource to be harvested, but as a person. And as I watched him walk down the driveway into the bright afternoon sun, I took a deep breath of the North Carolina air, feeling a profound, unshakable peace.